The International Commission on the Biological Effects of Electromagnetic Fields has released a study which proves radio frequency radiation is not as harmless as the FCC would like us to think. The study examines and invalidates outdated science from the 1980s and 90s, which was used to try and affirm that radio, cell phone, and 5G radiation was safe. Their publication is meant to show, quote, how the past 25 years of extensive research on radio frequency radiation demonstrates that the assumptions underlying the Federal Communications Commission's and the International Commission on Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection's exposure limits are invalid and continue to present a public health harm. Essentially, in the late 1990s, the FCC and ICNIRP set the international standard for radio frequency radiation limits to protect people from adverse effects. However, these limits were based on studies from the 1980s involving 40 to 60 minute exposures in 5 monkeys and 8 rats, a relatively light exposure time compared to today's world of cell phones, Wi-Fi, and now 5G radiation emanating all around us. Then in 2020, in light of new research on the harms of radio frequency radiation, the FCC and ICNIRP reaffirmed the safety of radio frequency radiation based on the same studies from the 90s and 80s. Clearly, they aren't actually concerned about public health. The group behind this new study was founded in 2021 after they were commissioned through a petition signed by more than 240 scientists who have published over 2,000 papers on electromagnetic frequency, biology, and health. They are calling for an immediate moratorium on further rollout of 5G wireless technology until safety is demonstrated and not just assumed. The scientists who conducted studies in the 80s and 90s assumed many things which the authors of this new study strongly disagree with, given the massive amount of new information gathered today. They assumed electromagnetic waves used in wireless communication don't have sufficient energy to break chemical bonds. They assumed radio frequency radiation could not damage DNA. And they assumed no additional data is needed to examine 5G exposure safety. That's why they continue to recycle the same 30-plus-year-old studies. However, there was a wide range of biological effects of radio frequency radiation that were left completely unexamined, such as DNA damage, damage to the heart, damage to the brain, and even reproductive damage, especially to sperm production. Also, quote, multiple human studies have found statistically significant associations between radio frequency radiation exposure and increased brain and thyroid cancer risk. So why did the FCC and the ICNIRP ignore this information? One of the heart damage research papers cited in the study was conducted by the National Toxicology Program. They exposed rats and mice to cell phone frequencies and found that the higher the dose of cell phone radiation, the more increased incidence of heart damage, brain damage, cancer, and adrenal gland tumors were observed. There was also a significant increase in DNA damage in rats and mice. Other research cited in this study shows that visual learning and memory in lab animals exposed to RF radiation below the supposed safe level resulted in consistent and reproducible decline. According to another research publication cited in this new study, quote, human and animal studies have shown that the testes is one of the most sensitive organs to RF EMF exposures, and that keeping a mobile phone in trouser pockets in talk mode can affect fertility parameters, such as sperm motility, sperm count, and it can even fragment the DNA of sperm. In one study, rats experienced a decrease in sperm count, decreased sperm quality, and the testicular development of rats was impaired. Rats who were exposed to radio frequency radiation while they were still in their mother's womb. All of this after only 1 week of exposure. In 2009, ICNIRP claims that radio frequency radiation was too weak to cause significant damage to DNA. But DNA damage has been observed numerous times in studies cited throughout this publication, especially in the brain cells of rats and mice. Another study even found significant increases in DNA damage in hair cells in the ear canal among 30 to 60-year-olds who used mobile phones 10 years for up to 60 minutes a day, when compared to people who don't use mobile phones at all. So, with its higher electromagnetic frequency and shorter wavelength, 5G is supposedly safer than other types of radio frequency radiation. The waves are said to be absorbed within the first millimeter of our bodies, 86% of the EMF power, with a skin penetration depth of 1 millimeter. However, as the study points out, ultraviolet light, which penetrates the skin less than 1/10 of a millimeter, is a recognized cause of skin cancer. How can 5G be safe when it reaches into our bodies deeper than ultraviolet light? Radio frequency radiation from 5G exerts its energy into our skin, our extremities, even the reproductive ones, and our eyes. It could even be causing cataracts as well as skin cancer. Who knows how deep 5G is really going? Just as the International Commission on the Biological Effects of Electromagnetic Fields has called for, the rollout of 5G should be stopped and studied further, taking into account the information provided in their new publication. Quote, because there are no adequate studies on health effects from short-term or long-term exposures to 5G radiation, in animals or in humans. With what we do know about the negative side effects of other forms of radio frequency radiation, humanity should put a stop to the 5G revolution before it surrounds us with an electromagnetic siege and smothers us to death.